Thanks again for joining our webinar today, Corporate Cellular Strategies. On behalf of Pinnacle IP Solutions, to everybody that's participating today, welcome. Pinnacle's created a series of webinars that vary and range from an introduction to our company, outlining detailed design to an optimized internet and data network, as well as the top ways that companies can lower operating costs in their businesses today. We want to communicate our strategies and ideas and how they may relate to your business. We only have a few slides to show you today, and again, this is a discussion about our approach and the potential opportunity for your business. Now, many of our customers come to us to help them improve their corporate cellular strategies, and in particular for ways to improve management and lower operating costs. What they're looking for is a way to create a predictable cost model that's easy to manage. And time again, we hear their frustrations come from high and unpredictable costs, usually associated with roaming, overages, and difficult management of the account. And the opportunity is in the design of the solution and the upfront strategy. In looking at cellular and the options available, it's really important to understand the components and elements that go into the total cost model. Some of the things that need to be considerations include your base plan, and those are things like daytime minutes, evenings and weekends, the incoming calls, text, messaging, as well as data. You also have to consider your variable needs, and where you have your variable costs happens to be the areas that you have your highest costs. And those variable needs include things like roaming, peak usage and overage charges, subscription fees, as well as miscellaneous charges like mid-plan change fees. There's also the device and associated costs, one-time costs related to upgrading devices and adding applications or peripherals, the ongoing cost as well as repair and support. There's also the applications, the required applications that you have that are corporate supplied, as well as the individual purchases and bandwidth implications by individuals for those purchases. And then finally, support, having the ability to have advanced replacement, being able to get support after hours, and notifications on usage charges for things like roaming. Those are all elements that need to be considered in your overall plan and strategy. Now, unlimited plans are great, but why do many all-inclusive plans seem to have overage charges, as well as usage charges that sometimes come with a significant additional cost? Unlimited really only applies where the carrier you choose has coverage, and you need to know and understand what that coverage is. So as an example, in Canada, for our Canadian customers, and I know we have a number of people on from the United States as well, but for the Canadian customers, there's a lot of different providers out there, and we'll call them Tier 2 providers. Providers like Fido, Mobilicity, Koodo, Virgin, etc. They all have great coverage in the city centers, but many of them lack reach outside of that core. Any of those carriers or those providers that don't have coverage in an outside area, every time you actually access network in those areas, it comes with an additional cost. And even when you take a look at the big three, Rogers, TELUS, and Bell, they've obviously got really good coverage nationally, but they don't have blanket coverage. And often in particular areas which might include Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and some northern provinces, they also require partners, and they need to piggyback with those partners, which again would mean for you an additional cost. And all providers and carriers need to partner for coverage in other countries, like for Canada and the United States, as well as the rest of the world. And even though the partners may be the same for each of the carriers, the cost can vary by as much as 300%. And not to pick on any one particular customer or carrier, but we've got a customer as an example that uses Rogers today. They happen to do a lot of travel to Japan. Well, the casual rate for data roaming in Japan on Rogers is $30 per megabyte. The same partner using Bell actually has a casual rate of $15 per megabyte. And that same partner with TELUS actually has a $10 charge per megabyte. So the reality is, if you were on a carrier like Rogers and you did travel to Japan, and you didn't call ahead of time to put a package or a plan in place, which unfortunately happens all too often for executives within companies. If you had been with TELUS at $10 a megabyte, you'd be paying a third of what you would have paid for Rogers in Japan. Now, not to pick on Rogers, Bell and TELUS have also their areas of weakness or gap, but that's just an example of understanding that unlimited or all-inclusive plans really don't mean that you don't have other costs. And in particular, depending upon your own usage, like roaming, you really need to understand what you're buying and what you're getting, because the cost variances can be very significant. So again, unlimited plans include the coverage that they show, and there are set fees, but they've also got overage charges for specific aspects of the plan, which would include roaming, long distance, and potentially data. And many of those don't even include things like an activation or monthly fee. So what appears to be a low fee, like we've got in this slide, of $50, might actually be $70 or more when you consider activation fees. So when we talk about being able to understand what you're purchasing, to understand what you require, and picking the right plan and carrier, you really need to understand your own needs. Now, one of the things that Pinnacle does in its assessment for customers is we take a look at the specific aspects that represent your total mobility or cellular strategy. Things like your local daytime minutes, understanding evening and weekend calling, incoming calls, carrier-to-carrier calling, what you're doing as it relates to text messaging, what your needs and requirements are from an individual as well as a corporate perspective for roaming outside of Canada, which would include the United States as well as for global travel, what your long-distance needs and requirements are inside of Canada, inside of North America, and globally, as well as your data requirements, local, Canadian, or nationwide, as well as global. And understanding what you require, that knowledge, wrapping that around what you've got for technology, and in particular the carrier that you choose, is critical in designing the right solution and optimizing your cost. Now let's take a look at devices. The reality is that there have been many changes and evolution in devices over the years. And the device you choose should be based on your own specific needs. And within a corporation, while there might be a benefit to standardizing on an individual device, the reality is a multiple device strategy is more common based on the user needs. So for instance, a salesperson with a mobility requirement has a different need and requirement than a manager and executive, and may have a different need and requirement than an operations person, which might be a technician on the road. That salesperson might require basic voice and email, and they might also require access to an application like Salesforce.com, something where they can track the calls and relationship they have with the customers. Executive and management might need access to specific files as it relates to finance or corporate strategy or budget, as well as email and voice. And operations people like technicians might need access to a ticketing system to be able to clear the call, and maybe to an application that gave the capability to either, one, get the customer to sign off on the work that had been done, or maybe even a device and application where you could actually charge and have that invoice paid for while on site. So it's really important to understand the individual user groups and what's required, and in doing so, understand the personalized applications and features as well as the bandwidth consumption of each of those. And think of things that are non-traditional that actually have a capability or the ability to consume a large amount of data. There's now the ability to do video calls, both with the BlackBerry messaging server, as well as the traditional Apple one, which is the picture messaging and video conferencing available. You've also got geography-based applications, which might be something that might be used for asset tracking and management, but it could also be used on a personal level to find businesses in your area where you happen to be traveling, like a restaurant or a hotel or an ATM or gas. And then there's applications like Siri, where obviously they use a large amount of data, but they have an advantage for convenience. And then there's games and personalized usage and the ability to incorporate things like Wi-Fi. Understanding all of those is critical in picking and choosing the right device. Now, when we take a look at the different devices that are available today in the marketplace, there is a lot of different applications, and there's also a lot of different availability. Things like the Galaxy 4, which has now become the Galaxy 4, which is the latest version, where people are raving about the camera and other features, like a 13 megabyte or megapixel camera, and great capability of extended battery life, which as we start to use the devices more and more, we see that the need for an extended battery life and capacity is important. And that device just was launched or will be launching in late April. We've got the BlackBerry Z10 that just came to the marketplace, and there's a lot of subsidized pricing that's out there where you can purchase that for roughly about $150. And it obviously takes the BlackBerry user experience with some of the things that people really enjoy, like the security aspect and the corporate communication aspect, to another level, and also incorporate some of the things that it was lacking before, like the capability for browsing and utilization of applications. Samsung also has other different devices out. There's HTC, which is a Windows 8 device. Nokia and Apple with the iPhone 5 that came out in September. So there's a lot of different devices available, and it comes down to the requirement. Now, our recommendation would be, while there are so many different options and choices, you should really take a look at your defined user groups to determine what their requirements are, to take a look at your plan and packaging to make sure that you optimize and pick the right device for your own unique needs, and to also find a way to keep the lowest operating costs. So choosing the device that you choose should be based on those specific needs, and the smartphone and personalized applications, key use for voice browsing, understanding the requirements for email, for video, for customized applications, the requirement for battery life, camera quality, access to new applications, as well as the ability to integrate with other features, with other technologies. So picking the device is not necessarily easy, but there's a lot of tools available, including on the Pinnacle website, that shows a comparison of each of the individual devices, and we'd encourage you to look at those. Now, when we talk a little bit about applications, there's a lot of different things that we think are relevant applications today, and we're going to cover a couple of them in a minute. But one of the applications that we use on a regular basis is tied back to our phone systems, or PBXs. And we have the capability through the phone and the application in particular to do a number of different things. So think of the cell phone not as an independent device, but think of the cell phone as an extension of your corporate communications. And what if you had the capability for advisory messaging, notifying people within your own user group that when they call you, they could see if you were in a meeting, if you were traveling, if you were internationally traveling, if you were gone for lunch, gone for the week on vacation. You have the ability to take a look at corporate as well as individual contacts, to have the availability for call history both inbound and outbound, the ability on the device to be able to see visual voicemail, which a lot of people like when you look at devices like the iPhone, an inter-office or corporate chat feature, which obviously has a security application to it, but also a convenience, the ability to take a look at locations and based on where you are, different preferences for the device, and different connection options, scheduling options, as well as schedules and settings. So those are all important things to consider when you look at integrating it with your business phone system. But also think about other things like international and long-distance calling, which happens to be very costly for most cellular providers. What about if you made an international or long-distance call, if that call could be routed through the PBX? And instead of paying 30 cents a minute for Europe, you're able to pay 2 cents a minute over an IP line, or 3 cents or 4 cents a minute over a traditional business line. There's ways in which you can do that, and that integration in those applications become critical. More and more people are talking about the capability of Wi-Fi calling. And while that might have the capability or might have the unfortunate benefit of boosting up the requirement for your in-office internet, it has the advantage of being able to reduce costs, in particular for roaming and travel. And what about if you were traveling to the United States or Europe and you were in a Wi-Fi zone and the application had SIP or IP capability, giving you the ability to make a call over that hotel or other business data network through Wi-Fi? There's also things to consider for the traveler. Instead of carrying an additional stick for for data or laptop convenience, the ability for the devices now to create hotspots for multiple users, or tethering to be able to take a computer and use the data off of a phone. There's the visual voicemail that we talked about, corporate directory, collaboration, but also things like tracking usage or directory assistance or picture messaging, where historically there are large costs. So let's take a look at the last three. First of all, let's talk about tracking usage. One of the things that unfortunately happens with a lot of people is they get a bill at the end of a month and they're surprised. And they're surprised because they used a lot more data than they thought they did. Or they were roaming and used a lot more minutes than they thought they did. And they get a surprise as it relates to cost. But what about if you had the capability to put an application on your phone that would give you the ability to manage your minutes, your data, and your messaging? Well, there is a lot of free applications out there, and I've just chosen one here through BlackBerry World, which is Cell Manager. And it gives you the capability to enter in the details regarding your plan, and it will notify you and alert you as it relates to your current usage. And as you get close to approaching using the maximum amount on your plan where you would incur additional charges, you'll be aware of that, and you can determine the type of usage that you're going to have based on that. So it's knowledge-based management of your account as an individual as well as a corporation. And again, being able to track your usage through numerous different applications that give you that capability is just one way to do that. The other one that we talked about is directory searches. You know, all too often we get calls from customers, and on their bill they're getting charged $250 every time they look up a number or use 411 for directory assistance. And what we encourage people to do is use free applications that are out there to eliminate that cost. Why pay $250 per directory search when it would be free by loading in applications like Yellow Pages Mobility? And there are applications for your iPhone, your iPad, there's applications for BlackBerry, Android, for Windows 7 phones, whatever device you've got, you can load the application, and instead of paying $250 per directory search, it's free. So we encourage people to use those applications for not only the savings, but the convenience and flexibility. And the other thing that we see a lot is people getting charged, you know, when they have different plans. Sometimes they have an unlimited text plan, but it doesn't include picture messages. And so what do you do in that particular case? Well, traditionally and more often, people are taking pictures not only for personal but business use, and what they do is they have a tendency to send it via text. Well, every time you send that via text without an advanced text messaging plan, you pay 50 cents per picture sent. But if you sent that same picture via email, it's free. So all you have to do is take your picture, and we've included here an example of being able to take a picture and send that picture via email off of an Android device. And you simply take the picture, attach it with a paper clip, send it off via email, and based on the plan availability that you have, the likelihood is the cost of that will be zero. So we encourage people to be able to, number one, understand their usage, understand their variable costs, and in this particular case, layer in free applications that take away that variable cost. Now, in addition to all the other things that we've talked about, one of the things that's really important is what kind of service and support can you expect? And is your carrier partner going to be there when you need them? So Pinnacle IP Solutions has a simple model, and it's based on superior support and service. From porting your numbers originally when we take over your account and set up new users, to the ongoing support that's required for troubleshooting, or even advice on the applications and devices that you look at. We believe that the superior service that we provide as Pinnacle IP Solutions is one of our key differentiators. And if you actually look on our website under our testimonials, you'll see time and time again people that talk about specific examples. But make sure that you have the right support in place, make sure that you have the right partner in place, and in particular, if you're looking at the ability to integrate with other corporate technologies, make sure the partner is going to be there when you need them. The other thing that we want to talk about is the right price. So obviously you have to start with the right base plan, and that's obviously a key requirement regardless of what you purchase. In addition to that, you need to make sure that you leverage the availability of bundles and things like corporate pooling, as well as what Pinnacle provides, which is wholesale price strategies to pass on price advantages to you. You also need someone to manage that strategy. You need someone to provide ongoing optimization of your plan. And the reality is, on average, Pinnacle saves companies 30 to 40% off of the best negotiated direct pricing that they have available. And it all comes down to the things that we just outlined above. Start with the right plan, leverage the tools that are available, manage that strategy, and provide ongoing optimization of the plan. Now, when we talk about layering in features and bundles, what is it specifically that we mean? Well, the reality is that pooling of local daytime minutes gives you the capability when an individual user uses all of their available minutes, they can access the unused minutes from the corporation, because not everybody has the same usage requirements. And if you don't do that, on average, you pay 45 cents per minute for overage charges on daytime minutes, and that can obviously get very costly. What Pinnacle provides further is extended corporate pooling. So if our customers have excess minutes available and a company goes over, they have the availability to access our pool to avoid overage charges. And then also looking at things like unlimited evenings and weekends. While there's a cost to that and associated with it, if you have a limited amount of minutes available with either evenings and weekends or incoming calls, it draws down on your local daytime minutes available. So getting unlimited evenings and weekends and unlimited calls, as well as unlimited Canadian texts, are all important things to be able to access. At the same time, looking at unlimited long-distance plans for people with the right amount of usage, whether it be Canadian or Canada to US or even international. On average, the carriers charge about 45 cents per minute for Canadian and North American long distance, and that can obviously get very costly. In fact, if you think of an average user using 100 minutes, and if you were being charged 45 cents a minute, you might have a charge as much as $45. Well, you can get an unlimited plan with unlimited long distance for North America for roughly around that same amount. So what we do is we provide plans that provide a base level of long distance. We manage that plan on an ongoing basis. And as individual users get to different thresholds that unlimited plans would become invaluable, we actually use and leverage those plans. In addition to that, we have data plans available, and there are data plans that range and vary from 1 gigabyte to 6 gigabytes. And as many of you know, those data plans actually carry overage charges of 3 to 5 cents per minute. So for every gigabyte that you are over, it could be $52 per gigabyte. And that's based on paying a 3 to 5 cent per megabyte rate. So understanding the right data plan, having the flexibility to migrate your data plans is critical. Now listen, before we click to the next page, there's a user on that I can hear the background noise. So if you can just put your phone on mute, that would be helpful. Thank you. And you're still not on mute. So whoever's on that doesn't have their phone on mute, please put it on mute. Thank you. Now, the other thing that we want to talk a little bit about is standard pricing and roaming. So when we look at standard pricing for casual travel to the United States, you'll see things from most of the Canadian carriers of charges of $5 plus per megabyte or $1.56 per minute. And you might even see charges of 90 cents per text. Now, if you pre-purchase travel packs, and those travel package on average for preferred rates for voice, data, and internet, or voice, data, and text is about $50, you lower your rate from $5 to $1 or $1.25 per megabyte. You're able to lower your minute cost from $1.56 down to 25 to 50 cents per minute. And you're able to lower your text cost from 90 cents to 60 and 80 cents per minute. Now, the problem with that is you have to remember each time to call the carrier to get a pack put on, and in saying that, being able to get those rates. And if you forget to call, from the period of time that you forgot to call, you're going to be paying premium or standard rates. And unfortunately, in particular with many executives within companies, they don't necessarily notify the person responsible for cellular ahead of time, and you see some significant costs. So one of the things that Pinnacle has done within our base plan strategy is we have incorporated the equivalent of preferred rates for travel to the United States. So without calling us ahead of time, you will get $1.25 per megabyte. You'll get 35 cents per minute, and you'll get 70 cents per text, which means that our data rate is 1/4 what the standard data rate is for the carriers. Our per minute rate is 1/5 of what the standard rate is for carriers, and our text rate is actually 20% cheaper. So without having to spend a lot of time and management in understanding when people travel, every single one of your users will get access to preferred pricing and traveling for the United States. Now, unfortunately, for roaming into the rest of the world, there is wide variability of rates and plans depending upon the zone. So those areas you will have to call us ahead of time. But again, we always work with our partners, and our partners being our customers, to provide the best rates available. Now, we talk a lot about the key to differentiation, but the reality is, the better that we understand your business and how you communicate, we can transfer that to knowledge. And in transferring that to knowledge, we can create smart designs. So when we work with you initially, it's really important for us to understand, while we're not a partner, what your specific usage is for all of those different elements that we talked about. Daytime minutes, evenings and weekends, long distance, data, roaming, applications, and other features. And as we understand that, with that understanding and knowledge, we'll create a better design. But more importantly, we'll continue to work on ways to optimize what you're doing, because our goal and objective is to be a partner and not a supplier. So really what we want to do is work with you and understand the way in which you communicate, help you develop the right strategies for your organization, and in doing that, create optimized plans and strategies. So the baseline of that is really taking effective of some of the strategies that we have in place, leveraging pooling and applications. By doing that, create a better design and a simplified billing process, ultimately to lower your operating costs. The reality is that a call made on a cell phone with any carrier is the same call. Data used for any carrier is the same strategy. And text and other things are the same. So why pay more for the same thing when, if you have the right plan and strategy in place, you can simply pay less for the same service, and in many cases, pay less for more service, better performance, better bandwidth. Now, when we look at the job that we do, there are many testimonials that we have, and again, you can go onto our website and take a look at the comments that have been provided by our customers and relayed back to us. But more than the testimonials, our customers continue to refer us to their customers and partners because our strategies work. We often hear, if I could get more for less, fully managed and supported, why wouldn't I do it? It's a great question. And when you look at the testimonials provided by our customers, time and time again, that's what they refer to. And some of the things that they talk about that are important are creating integrated strategies, helping them to lower their operating costs, providing a superior level of support and technology, enhancing the end user experience, and again, doing that at a lower price point. And not only that, being able to be the type of partner that provides better service and support on a continuous basis, better pricing and strategies, lower operating costs by 25 to 40%, and again, being that partner that someone's looking for, not a provider. The fact is, anybody can give you a quote on something, but being able to super serve your needs and understanding what those are is really what a partner should be looking for, and that's really where we excel. Now, what I'd like to do now is turn this over to some of the questions that we have. And so again, if you have a question, if you'd want to send that to us via chat, we can hopefully answer that. And we try and answer as many questions as we can within the time frame that we've given. But one of the questions that I've got from one of the customers is, we happen to have extensive costs as it relates to roaming. And unfortunately, it's not the same person that travels to the U.S. all the time. What ideas would you have as it relates to reducing that? So first of all, as we mentioned, the standard rates for roaming are $5 per megabyte for data, $1.56 per minute for voice, and 90 cents per text. And the Pinnacle rates are $1.25 per megabyte, 35 cents per minute, and 70 cents per text, which means we're providing you preferred U.S. travel rates without having to buy packages. So if you were to buy the package that we provided for every one of your users, and let's say you had 100 users, at $50 per user, you'd be spending $5,000 a month just for the privilege of paying lower preferred rates. While we don't really emphasize that as part of our value proposition, the $5,000 in savings, because you're only going to add packs, travel packs to people when they're traveling, the fact is, it's a convenience by being able to utilize our preferred pricing strategy, and it's a strategy to be able to lower your costs. So if you have roaming costs into the U.S. and you're effective with some people and ineffective with others, that's one of the ways in which our preferred U.S. travel prices and roaming prices becomes very effective. Okay, we have another question regarding long distance, both Canadian, North American, and international. So the question is, we have certain people on unlimited plans, but again, we're seeing a number of users that at different times go over, and we are paying on average 45 cents a minute for our North American long distance. As I mentioned earlier on, the standard rates for long distance in North America is roughly around between 25 and 45 cents per minute, depending upon the carrier. So you're not going to be able to avoid that unless you come up with another strategy. You can buy plans or pre-buy plans, again, that provide a lower rate, 10 cents per minute in Canada, but you can also buy plans and packages that are available for $25 per month in Canada, $35 per month potentially in the United States. So what we do is we start every single user out with 100 minutes of free Canadian long distance. That's part of our standard base plan. And as users go from the 100 minutes up to 250 minutes, we actually bump them up to another plan for $5 per month. So instead of paying 45 cents a minute for the 100 minutes, which would be $45, or even if it was 25 cents a minute, $25, you're getting that for free as part of our plan. As you go to the 250 minutes, which would cost you somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 if you didn't have a plan or package, we bump you to that level for $5. And as you go beyond that, where it makes sense to have unlimited plans, we add unlimited plans for your organization. So long distance can be tricky. It is one of the areas where the carriers make a lot of money. So having the right plan and package available is important. And I'm glad you brought that up because it's one that's often overlooked. Even when we're talking about so-called unlimited plans that are based on unlimited local, long distance can really get to you quickly. And the final thing is regarding data usage. As we've moved to a more ubiquitous smartphone strategy, we have seen data usage escalate 3, 4, and 5 times what we had seen before. We would like to limit personal use to avoid overage charges. Is there anything that you'd recommend? So that's a good question, right? Because the reality is, if you look back in data requirements yesterday, people were using the data strictly for email and browsing. And as time has gone on, we're now layering in more and more applications that are readily available online through iTunes as an example, or the BlackBerry Messenger, or the Android shop. All of those different areas, you have the capability to download applications. And while those applications may be free, they also might use a ton of data. And one of the ones that we see all the time is things like FaceTime, which is video streaming to communicate with friends and family. And video is one of the biggest data bandwidth users that you could possibly use. So what is it that you can do? I think you need to really, number one, understand your corporate needs and requirements, develop the right plans to be able to support that, but also create some corporate rules around personal usage, right? It's great that companies are able to provide their employees with phones and devices, but having some management around that is critical. And giving yourself a cushion and latitude or leeway to be able to do that is obviously pretty important. So designing the right plan, providing the right device based on their corporate requirements is critical. And knowing what the overage costs could be are also going to be important. So if you think a little bit about, if an average plan is 1 gigabyte, and traditionally your users are using 300-400, and now that's jumped beyond 1 gigabyte, understand what the costing model is to jump from 1 gigabyte to 2 gigabytes. If you were to take a look at going from 1 to 2 gigabytes, that $10 per month to upgrade from 1 to 2 gigabytes would actually cover a year's worth of additional overage for that same 1 gigabyte in a month. So picking the right plan, defining the right strategy is critical. And we also have some really good ideas wrapped around, how to share that cost with users, providing extended personal use capability, and maybe potentially sharing a cost for personal usage. And more as time goes on, we're going to see things like the availability of, right now even available, data sharing like minute sharing buckets. And in addition to that, ways in which you can share costs with the employees for personal use so that you can go from multiple to single devices. But in the end, I think we'd all agree that mobility applications and devices have made us more accessible than we've ever been before. It's given corporations the ability to be more responsive to their customers, as well as being able to communicate and collaborate more effectively inter-office and with employees and key user groups. And I think that as we look forward and make sure that we incorporate the right things into our strategy, the more effective that we're going to be. Now that's really it for our webinar today. I just want to let everybody know that if you go to our website, which is www.pinnacleips.com, a number of the webinars that we do on a weekly basis, which would include designing the right internet, corporate cellular strategies, things in which you can design your overall corporate plan, corporate communication and IT plan and strategy, are all available on the web from the different webinars that we do. And we always look for ideas and suggestions. Ones that we've got coming up, the top 5 applications for businesses, integrated network services, things like SIP and quality assured network services, which are becoming more and more crucial for people that are using data networks for voice and video calling. Cell phone integration with twinning and Wi-Fi. I'd like to spend a little bit more time on that today, but we do have some great white papers online that you can look at. Designing the right voice LAN from an infrastructure perspective, and also lowering operating costs, the top 3 things that you can do today. Now, we've got a lot of great feedback from people that have participated on the webinars, and we'd encourage you to reach out to us if you want to send us a little bit of an email regarding either some challenges that you have that you'd like us to address, or ideas that you've got beyond what we talked about in this webinar. Just email us at admin@pinnacleips.com or call us at using our 1-800 number. So thank you again for joining us today in our webinar. We appreciate your participation and look forward to talking to you next week.